Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to my second channel geography video. A geography video that's actually sponsored by Surfshark, but more about that after I explain the point of this one, because I've always been fascinated about where people choose to live. I mean, out of the giant Earth surface, most people live in very small areas. I mean, people have the ability to choose to live anywhere, but most people choose to live in cities very close to each other. And in fact, if you then take the biggest cities, the biggest 100, as we've done in this map, you can see how of the biggest 100 cities, 1 in 7 people live inside these places. Despite this taking up a tiny fraction of the Earth's surface, 1/7 of people choose to live in just one of these places, and that is really interesting. And in fact, looking at this map, it's easy to put together some patterns, and those are some patterns I'd like to help you put together after I explain the many benefits of Surfshark. So Surfshark is a VPN service, and they asked if I had any benefits of VPNs I'd like to talk about. And let me tell you, I'm a big believer in VPNs, and let me explain to you the 3 big reasons why. One is watching content that is in other countries. Do you want to watch the things that are on Netflix UK? Sure, you can do that normally, but Netflix US is so much better. If I want to watch Netflix US content, I have to hop on a plane, spend $400, but you can do it for much cheaper by getting a VPN like Surfshark. So watching geo-locked content, I've been watching this weird Australian show recently by setting my location as Australia. It's called H2O, Just Add Water. It's definitely made for teenage girls, and I'm not a teenage girl to the best of my knowledge, but I like it anyway, and I can watch it because of a VPN. But even better than just that, a VPN's also great when you travel. Some countries have restrictive things on the internet. That includes China. In China, you can't do any social media because it's Western and it's bad or something like that. But also the UK. The UK has a porn block on any mobile internet by default. You have to call up your internet service provider and say, hey, please, could you please turn on the porn? And then you have to give them some verification of your ID. It's very awkward, it's very time consuming, and let's be honest, the internet shouldn't be like that. So instead, you turn on a VPN, and then your ISP has to know nothing about your private habits, and that is the big reason I recommend Surfshark. And was this the weirdest, most uncomfortable integration I've ever done? Yes, it is, but as always, I think it's important to get paid by companies that are actually doing useful services that might help you out. I don't do integrations often, but when I do, it's for a good cause. And what better cause than avoiding restrictive governments in China and the UK? Anyway, with that said, so this is the 100 most populated cities. And looking at this map, it's easy to try and work out some patterns, right? It's easy to try and be like, okay, so even though, like, first of all, you see the very clear trend towards the global north. Most of these cities are north of the equator, 88 of them, if I did my counting correct. And so as well as that, as well as most cities being in the north, there's a very heavy tendency towards the east. Again, like, north is the big tendency, and then also east. In the Western Hemisphere of the 2 Americas, you can see how there's like 15 to 20 cities here, but the majority exist on the east. So when you combine those 2 factors, you get India, you get China, and you get all of the big cities. No country contains more than just a handful of no country contains more than a handful of cities besides China, India, and the United States. Even Indonesia, which is one of the most populated countries on Earth, has just 3 of the biggest 100 cities. And then if you look at Europe, it's like 1 in the UK, 1 in France, 1 in Germany, 1 in Italy, 2 in Spain, 2 in Russia, and that's it for the entire continent, assuming you don't count Istanbul. It's really interesting to look at this and be like, oh, so cities exist in very close together areas. I mean, look at those European ones, look at those Asian ones, like cities exist very close together, and that's interesting. But I actually see this the opposite way around. This map is actually kind of misleading in that way. Like, it's obviously just sharing data, trying to show like, hey, did you know I live in one of the top 40 biggest cities, and some people live in one of the top 100, and if you're watching this in LA, you live in, wait, what, is that LA right there? Yeah, you live in one of the top 20. I guess they're doing by metropolitan area rather than city limits. But anyway, it's super, actually maybe LA, whatever. So they're doing it, very big cities that exist around the world. That's interesting. But this map I found to be a much better indication of where people live and why. This is a map of the most populated cities in each continent. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for every continent. So apparently even including Antarctica. We'll ignore that for now though. If you look across, Africa, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look across Europe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look across Asia, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look across Australia, same thing. And something you'll spot here on this map is the much more interesting data point, which is kind of what I like to call circles of gravity. Every city has a pull effect on all of the people that are around it, because cities attract young people in there, not young like, you know, a 5-year-old, but they attract young working people who want to make a living in a very specialized environment, and they have this giant pulling effect that tends to mean that they're very far away from each other. Even though this map paints a world where cities are pretty close together, first of all, none of these cities actually are close together, with the exception being like, yep, some of these cities in China are basically overlapping, should be considered the same city but aren't. But even if you look at these super close together cities on the east coast of the United States, New York is quite far away from Washington, D.C., which is quite far away from Baltimore, quite far away from Boston. They're close together in the sense that this corridor, these 4 blobs, which are super close together, are how far apart? Let's find out. So from Boston all the way over there to Washington, which is the name of the state, it is 392 miles or 631 kilometers. They're close together, but also not, right? Even if you just go New York to Baltimore, to Washington, sorry, you can see how there's 200 miles, 318 kilometers. It is a huge distance between those places, and so like, you know, they're close, but they're not really close. They're very distinct spheres, and this is actually the exception rather than the rule. Even on this map, you can see how most of these squares, the delightfully colorful squares. I like this map just because it's got some color to it, but most of the squares are actually pretty far apart. When they're close together, it's because of like, oh yeah, humans tend to settle by the coast. So when China has 1 billion and almost a half people, they tend to settle by the coast. And how many coastal cities can you have that don't overlap like crazy? Here's Hong Kong, a tiny island. Here's Shenzhen, a tiny, deliberately next to Hong Kong. There's Guangzhou. Like when you think about it like that, it's like, yeah, actually, it's kind of shocking that there are such huge swaths where there's no top 100 city. This giant area, this giant area, this giant area, the center of the continent. And you'll notice how it's mostly in the center of the continents and to the extreme north and the extreme south. Look at New Zealand. You can't see New Zealand on this map. Look at New Zealand, how it doesn't exist because it has no big cities. It's actually that I'm covering it if you want to see. There's New Zealand, no biggest city. Isn't that fun? So basically, what I think this tells us is that cities have this like pulling effect that like I think we all know inside. When you think about it, it makes sense. If you something I've heard. Something that every time I speak to someone who's from London, what they're actually from is they're from somewhere around it. One of the Microsoft executives I speak to, he's actually from Guildford, but like Guildford, basically London, right? I met a guy on a plane once. It was really, it was one of those planes that had a bar on it. Don't think about this too much, but we met once, and he was like, "Where are you from?" London too, and like after we said that, it's like, okay, I lied. I'm actually from, let's say Luton. And he's like, I lied. I'm actually from, I want to say he said Ashford, maybe Maidstone. I remember being in the south. He was somewhere in Kent. And it's like, yeah, there's something about cities that draw people inwards. Like London is not just London, the city itself. All of these like names you're seeing around, Wembley, that's London. Enfield, that's London. Romford, that's London. Even the places like we mentioned, like even though Maidstone is its own distinct place that has its own distinct culture, not culture, economy. There's no culture in Maidstone. Let's be real with ourselves. But it has its own distinct, things going on right there. But if you have an extremely skilled position, if you're an extremely skilled person doing a very niche position, you're going to end up moving to London. It has a physical kind of gravity towards it that means that even though I've lived in, again, let's imagine it's Luton. Definitely not doxing myself right now, and just going along with what I said earlier in the video. But let's say that I lived in Luton. I've always had this draw towards the center. I've never had this draw towards Birmingham. It's just over there. I've never had this draw towards Manchester. Nice city. Liverpool. Really like it. Could live there for a while. There's just this like inherent draw inside of me that lures me towards the center of London. Why is that the case? Who knows for sure? But this is something that everyone kind of feels inside of them. But using feelings to describe this, I think is not the easiest way to explain something. Because, I've heard the exact same thing as a way to describe What's going on? Also, look at this. Is Wembley London? Yes. Is Hounslow London? Yes. Kingston? Technically London. But the better way to describe this is to look at like an actual boundary map. Because, again, stories can work all day, every day. But let's use some actual... Let's back it up, shall we? So here are the administrative counties of England in 1890. As you can see, here is London, this little blob right here. That was already giant for a city's authority to be. For a city to take up that much space... Huge when you actually think about it. And there is a county called Middlesex. Middlesex is a now defunct county because you know what happened when the next boundary review happened? London had expanded so much, Middlesex vanished entirely. Also, Kingston became a part, not of Surrey anymore, part of Greater London. Also, here's Kent, as you can see, lost a little bit of land in that one. Also, Essex and basically cities just expand outwards. But as well as expanding outwards physically, they draw people inwards. The reason that that works, the reason that a place as far away as Croydon or as a place as far away as Epping, for instance. Epping, even though it's a part of Essex, it's like in the London orbit. Maybe because it has the London Underground station there. But like the fact that these people from all these far places away are lured in while the city expands out is something very interesting about humans that is hard to describe, because it's not just London. Like, if I describe my own country, of course I can come up with a billion examples. I can talk about how, like, you know what? The great things in Luton, which, for the record, should we do fun facts about Luton? We should do fun facts about Luton. So, the greatest thing about Luton is what I like to call best kebab. I don't know why this is so common. No matter where you go in the UK, you'll find a store that has the name Best Kebab. And let me tell you about my local Best Kebab. It, So some people will say they don't do the best kebabs, and sure, they don't do the best kebabs. They don't even do a good kebab. Anyway, so moving on. The fact is that lots of other cities do have this same effect. I've heard another YouTuber, CGP Grey, has spoken about like he lived in upstate New York, but there's a pull towards the city. There's a draw towards the city, even though if you live in Poughkeepsie, if you live in Newburgh, actually that's less like Poughkeepsie right here. If you do live in Poughkeepsie, I think it's Poughkeepsie, but if you live in this place right here, as you can see, it's a quaint little American town, but New York is always the backdrop to that. At one point in time, if cities continue their path, this will no longer be a quaint little American town. Look at that, that's such a New York style apartment building already, but like this quaint little town that looks like it was built several hundred years ago, because it probably was, because that's how East Coast America be, will become just a part of New York City. This will be Manhattan with its own, rail line going through it, etc., etc. Like, that is the natural tendency of cities. If you look at every one of the cities on this list, there is a small version of that happen. Let's take I know, I'm sure if we look at, I've never spent any time before looking at the situation in, I forget the capital of Argentina's name, very embarrassing for a geography YouTuber, but the situation in, I want to say Buenos Aires? Yeah, Buenos Aires. I'm sure the exact same thing's happening there. This is one of the 20 biggest cities in the world, and what's happened is Buenos Aires, the city boundary is this, but Villa Martelli and Florida, you ever want to live in Florida? I can get you some cheap property. Florida is very clearly just a part, there's a rail line taking you directly into the center of Buenos Aires. This looks pretty nice, actually. Should we just explore the 20 biggest cities in the world? That way, even if we don't come to any grand conclusion or make any points today, I can show you each of the 20 biggest cities in the world. See, isn't this nice? But also, isn't this distinctly city? Like, again, it clearly was at one point a village based... Looking at this street, you can tell this was like a cute little town. Village might be going a bit far. But now it is just a part of the city. It's a part of that urban sprawl that is maybe better when you see it like this. Just the endless rows of houses. Buenos Aires, just a reminder on this map. Oh god, I've lost Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires, just a reminder, is this area here. All of this, it just keeps on expanding. The settlements keep going and going and going. The people of Belén de Escobar, badly named unfortunately named place. Let's not insult their naming with their little koto. Most of the people here probably have some link to the major city over there. They're not like, oh yeah, Buenos Aires, never heard of it. No, that is the major draw in their life. If we look at, let's do this. Let's go look at, you know what? I'm not going to look at Brazil's one, just to offend any Brazilians watching. Yeah, not going to look at your big city, Sao Paulo, I'm guessing that is. Let's instead take a look at, wait, is Manila in in the Philippines, one of the 20 biggest cities. According to this map, it is. You know, maybe we should question... Maybe the real lesson from this is, like, question your sources and how they come to their conclusions. But you can see how, like, oh yeah, if we go to Manila, the exact same thing. Here is the actual area of Manila. As you can see, very tiny compared to... In fact, Quezon City, you know, I once spoke to someone from Manila. For an extended period of time over many dates, and did not ever ask how to pronounce any of these names. And that's on me. That is oh wow, that's big. I've heard about this being a big city. I guess if you count them as the same city, it makes sense that they combine. But like, look at this just sprawl between two entirely unique cities that exist side by side together. Then there's San Juan over here. You might think San Juan, like, isn't that a bit Spanish? Pasadena. You know, are we just in California again here? But you can see how, like, yeah, the people who live here. In fact, that very person who said she was from Manila was actually from one of the weird suburbs on the outer edges. And this is a fact that people tend to do. They tend to glob themselves into a big city because humans, for whatever reason, do tend to naturally live in cities. It's kind of frowned at, you know, like, again, I'm speaking in English, and therefore the majority, not the majority, the plurality of videos and viewers on this video are from the United States. But the United States does this too, even though people love the small town feel in America, which to this day I still can't articulate or understand what that means. But the truth is, people do club together in, depending on whereabout they are. There's free, again, so this is Toronto, Canada. This is Mexico City, which takes everyone from Mexico and lures them in. Draws them in is a better word than lures them in. Lures them in makes it sound like cities are waiting with a pile of candy trying to feed it to you. But anyway, so if you look at this, you can see, like, there are 3 of the 5 biggest cities in all of North America in just the United States. One on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and then one in the middle. The 3 parts of America that have people living there have a giant city, one of the 3 biggest in the continent, in fact, because that's how much people glob together. This idea of a city that draws you in tells you why one of the most misleading things on the planet is average population density. Here is the average population density for the United States. Here's the average population density for Canada. As you can see, they're vastly different. But when you look at the population maps of those countries, you realize that Canadians live actually pretty close together. They just happen to own a lot of territory. You know, the amount of territory that a country owns and the amount of people that a country owns, air quotes. I mean, actually, the United States charges you to revoke your citizenship, so arguably they do own you. But the amount of people that a country owns, the amount of the land that a country owns, are kind of 2 very irrelevant facts. And the amount of people that a country can support doesn't come down to its land at all. It comes down to how rapidly those cities develop, how prosperous they can become. You know, Chicago, without Chicago being here, so many of these other Midwestern cities would be worse off, would be... and so many of the places around Chicago, it's called the Chicagoland area, I want to say, would be worse off. Even Rockford, all the way over here, I'm sure Rockford is very proud of itself with its Sunnyside cannabis dispensary right next to a bakery. You know, I feel like that's a bit of a... I think they knew what they were doing here with their... Oh god, it's so sad and empty. The suburbia in America is like crazy to me. But yeah, I think they knew exactly what they were doing. But the fact that people live closer and closer together, yeah, it's not because of choice. Like, the fact that so many Americans will defend living in their small town feel, the fact that so many people will vehemently defend these ideals tells me, distinctly, yeah, your boy Toycat, what it tells me that people don't like living close together, but we do it anyway. I made a video on the third channel recently where I was talking about the prices of houses in London. Hot tip here, they be very expensive, huh? Isn't that interesting? And it's interesting that people choose to pay those prices, even though a lot of those people won't like living in London just because they want a house, a flat. They want to own a thing over here. And it's like, why do people... Again, Chicago has such a bad reputation, even amongst people that live there. I'm about to go to New York. It's a place that so many people... Well, hey, also look at this, by the way. 3D view. That was one of my favorite, like, weird niche New York, weird niche Google Maps features. But like, people will come to live in this city en masse. Look at the numbers of them here, and the reason they'll choose to do this, despite not wanting to live there, like, people don't want to do it, and it's expensive. But there's something else. It's the work. It's all the other things in their life. Like, if you want to have a fun time, you come to a city. Maybe not New York. Maybe instead you think, nah, the fun times are had over in Conway, Arkansas, or let's pick an actually big city. You know, let's say I think St. Louis is one of the biggest cities in the region. All the fun in the region is had in St. Louis. Let me tell you about the City Museum. You see how it's an offbeat discovery center and playground? Do you see that school bus that's going off the side? That's a lot of fun to us in St. Louis. I don't know why these geography videos end up with me doing accents all the time, but isn't that interesting? I think that's mighty interesting. So yeah, the fact is, there are the things to do, the restaurants. Look at that Gourmet Soul restaurant and catering. Look at this Imais pizza. Yeah, 4 stars. That is the most unappealing pizza I've ever seen in a Google Maps thing. People come to these places for work, for the other things, and it reminds you that geography is not a matter of work. Even though we can live anywhere, we choose not to. We choose to live in the worst places, in big air quotes. But I would actually argue they are. You know, that's like a whole thing where, like, no one wants to defend living in a cramped box that costs too much, because you come there for all the things that aren't easily defendable. Your job, you go there for your fun. You go there for the density of people leads to many bizarre things. Like, you know, let me mention something I love. I love very weird niche. Let's go to Las Vegas, shall we? The density of people here, because obviously people come here. It's basically a tourist attraction, and the tourist attraction means people come here to gamble. But the density of people also means that there is a huge Asia town over here, and then there's also like this street right here, Spring Mountain Road. It's a bunch of like Asian stores, but like and in that you find like, here's a donut store. It's incredible. I like 4.8 stars. See, people agree. That donut store does not exist in that small town that I want to grow up in America. I don't know why I'm doing this. This is picking on America all of a sudden. But like, there's lots of other examples. You know, even I mock Best Kebab, but Best Kebab cannot exist in a village of 17 people. And so something interesting about humans is that we, even though there's all these settlements that exist, you know, Newmarket people probably consider themselves to be basically living outside of Cambridge. Even I grew up in a pretty small village on the grand scheme of things. Even that small village had small villages outside of it that people like commuted into to go to school, work, etc. Because ultimately, most of the best things that humans do rely on other humans. And that's why I think something interesting, you know, even though the pandemic has made people want to live further and further out, people haven't gone from living in Zone 1 London and Marylebone or Mayfair or Clerk. People haven't gone from living in Clerkenwell, my favourite area of London, maybe. It's not actually that. You know, I like Fitzrovia. Yeah, is that a good area? I bet. Look how nicely defined it is. It's got this little cutout for Curry PC World in the London edition. But people don't live here. People have moved from their tiny flats in here out of London, you might hear. But they'll have moved to somewhere just within reach of it. They'll be like, oh yeah, I've moved out to the country and live in somewhere like Richmond, which by the way is just, how far away is Richmond from the centre of London? Then they'll move somewhere just 8 miles away, 13 kilometers away. Oh, sorry, 13.47 kilometers, 8.3 miles away. They'll move somewhere not too far away with just more space. People are making all these changes, and some people have said it's the death of cities, because cities are what spread diseases. There will be another pandemic in this century. There'll be another pandemic in this decade. We'll probably just get on top of it. But there will be these situations that happen, and people will choose to live in these places anyway, I think. And I wanted to throw this narrative out there as like, you know what? These places are the reason for all the virus spread, but these places are also the reasons for a lot of the other cool things you probably like. And I think that's something you can get on board with, unless you don't. Also, let me know if you agree. Tell me, actually, don't dox yourself. Damn, I was going to be like, okay, so without doxing yourself and saying your location, doxing's the wrong word for what I'm saying, without giving away your location on the internet, do you live in, like, if you live in a small place, let's say you live in Moapa, do you just say you live in Vegas? Because, like, it's the near, like, do you feel this gravity, or do you feel the opposite, you know? I live in, you know, West Jordan, but I don't want to say I live in Salt Lake City. I live in West Jordan. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the fact that I'm a tool. You know, like, is that what you are? Are you proud of being a tool with your Walmart Supercenter and your Panda Express and your Applebee's you know, actually, maybe you could be happy here forever. I don't know. Let me know. And I'll see you all in the next one. Though, goodbye. And thank you for Surfshark for sponsoring this video. I like money. So I like it when companies give me money.